Thank you everyone for getting in today without a problem. I actually have not been checking my email to see if there are problems. So I don't know if Lynn or I would get the email about that. I should check. And thank you everyone for being on. It's nice to see that you're with me. I don't expect everyone to show their faces. Just so you know, that's not why I'm seeing my face. I don't expect you to, and I will stop in a minute anyways. But yeah, today we're going to have a couple of great presentations from states who have gotten into the virtual aspect and how they're interacting with their districts and how the districts themselves are thinking about this and serving children with disabilities. So we're going to be hearing on the ground what this looks like in different parts of the work, from the state level project work to the district work and down to the student. And then we're also going to hear from a technology project that is free to the public that you could be using for kindergarteners during this time, or for that you could be supporting schools to use within a multi-tiered system of support within MTSS. So if you are new, I'm Jennifer Coffey, and I am the SPDIG program lead. We also have other project officers on with us today. We have Tara Crochane, Anita Vermeer. Let's see if I'm missing anyone. I think that's it now. Someone else might jump on. Tara, do you want to say hi?
If I can unmute fast enough. Yes. Hi, everyone.
You're fast
today.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and, this is new for me too, but I think I end up doing okay with it. So I'm going to stop my video and show you my slides. Can everyone see my slides?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, great.
You might want to minimize that little black box if you like.
I'm just gonna put it. It's kind of my safety blanket, and just in case my son comes down and I suddenly need to do something. I think most of you know I have a 7-year-old, and so he is, I think, doing other good things with his time right now, other than being close to me. All right. So as I said earlier, if you were on a few minutes early, I in no way want to minimize that these changes are bad for a lot of people. People are dying. It is hard. There are children with disabilities who are not getting the services they need right now. There are parents who are tearing their hair out, family members, no doubt. But I do want to say, before I start talking about some changes with the SIG network, that we are all, I know, myself, Lynn, John Lind, everyone at OSEP, Tara, Anita, etc., all of you out there, we are trying to join in with the change, move with it, joining the dance to make everything work the best we can possible. So in the end, children and students with disabilities are served well. So the first change I'm going to talk about, SPDIG National Meeting. We are going to go virtual. Some of you probably expected this. This is the October meeting where we come together in DC. FHI 360 is closing their doors. So we were released from that conference contract. And to me, that was a good indicator that we needed to rethink this. I know a lot of state people, even though you have grant funds to support you coming, you were going to be prohibited from traveling. We could see that coming. We were already hearing from people that was the case. I know you are doing things virtually right now. You're continuing with your professional development. We're going to hear some about that today. And so we can learn from all of your experiences on how to best hold the virtual national meeting. So we look forward to learning from you. We want to be innovative as much as possible so that we can all learn together new, interesting ways to do things. And then, again, the presenters today are going to have some good ideas for us. So on Monday, we have a recorded conversation. Monday's conversation, sorry, I'm going to say conversation one more time. We had a discussion about the revisions to the GEPRA/program measures and what that's going to look like. And I received feedback from project personnel, from evaluators about how they feel about when those changes should take place and what that should look like. So that's recorded. You see the event calendar link there, and you can get to the recording there. February, I talked about those changes that were coming at that time. And so if you want to go back to February's recording, it's also available to you there. Then I also wanted to let you know, just in case you hadn't seen the email, I had called for feedback on the EBPD components, evidence-based professional development components, back in February. I didn't get any response at that time. Held this newest webinar, and people were interested in having more time. And so if you go to signetwork.org on the homepage under the news section, you can go ahead and click that link and upload the document, make your changes and track changes, and just get them to me by May 15th, please. The SPDIG notice of proposed priority came out. We sent it to you on April 24th. The comments are due May 26th. You can call me or email me with questions about the notice of proposed priority. I did want to remind you of the NASD OSEP webinar series that we had last year. It was a year-long series, monthly webinars for potential applicants. And so that is still applicable. And I want to share on the notice. So here, you can see the notice of proposed priority. And in the notice of proposed priority, there's an important part here where we have the Federal Register from 2017. So this notice of inviting applicants still stands. And one of the questions has been, you know, does this notice of proposed priority get rid of the old thing? And it doesn't. So the 2017 still stands because it's based on the IDA statute, and it talks about relevant statutory and regulatory priorities. So just so you know, that NASD webinar series still applies. It still fulfills, we need to fulfill the IDA statute, and this is in addition to. And so just be considering that. Please do write in comments if you know, as you consider what this would mean for you, the notice of proposed priority, please write comments in response to it, because we need to know what it would mean for your projects. But do be thinking about, you know, what it would look like. It talks in the notice about, is there a certain group of personnel who you might be able to serve where you would give them choice in their professional development? And it talks about that different groups might be, just some examples, not something that you would need to necessarily do, but give you ideas. So really thinking through what it might look like with your SPDIG, considering the requirements of the SPDIG and IDEA. All right, so any questions about that? All right, I'm going to go back to my slideshow. And I can't see comments right now, so I will go back in a second. But if Lynn, if you want to tell me any comments.
Will do.
Okay, thanks. So in the meantime, we had a question from Colorado from Kristen Brown. Kristen, do you want to raise that question?
I was talking while muted.
That never happens to me. That did not happen to me just, 10 minutes ago. So anyways, welcome.
Hello, everybody. I had an overall question about budgets and how you're dealing with spend down around travel funds that were allocated to meetings and just all the other things that are happening with COVID. When we're looking at our budgets, we're getting requests for computers, tablets, chargers. You can probably identify with this because you're probably getting the same questions as we're looking at just moving forward, what it's going to look like with students going back to school. So I wanted to ask states what you're doing in terms of your budget and have that discussion around perimeters.
Are you saying that people are asking to use SPDIG funds for those purposes? Or are they
Yes.
just asking, or? Okay.
Yes, so a couple things. One, I was wondering for other states if you're getting these questions because things where you had budgeted prior to the pandemic, things have changed. So we're having our summit virtually, people aren't traveling, and so they're wanting to expand in different places given our current situation. So I just wanted to know what other states, if they were getting the same kind of questions, how you're navigating the budgets. I mean, right now we're saying no. It has to be linked with PD and some other things, but I just wanted to pose that to all of you to see what was going on in your states.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, and why don't so we need to get into the presentations, but I wanted Kristen to be able to pose the question so that you could start adding in the chat pod. And then perhaps if we have time at the end, we'll have a little more discussion about it and see if maybe it's a discussion for future time as well. Does that work for you, Kristen?
Thank you. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you for letting me ask.
Yeah, no, I think it's obviously a very relevant question for all of us. So I appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to go ahead. I believe I stopped sharing my screen. Is that correct, Lynn?
Yep, it doesn't look like you are.
Okay, so Sydney Seeger, you can go ahead and share your screen now. And Sydney is the Utah SPDIG project director and has been doing some great work with AIR, creating MTSS modules, and has also had some good conversations with their districts, their LEAs recently, and also is going to be telling us about Native American students and what that's looking like for Native American students. So Sydney, I will turn it over to you.
Hello, I'm excited to be with you today. Probably working with Teams for one of my first times as well, so you'll have to excuse me as I ask a ton of questions. Are you able to see my screen so far?
It looks great.
Perfect. So as she was saying, my name is Sydney Seeger, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to be with you today in this virtual study. Today, I'll be talking to you about how, as a SPDIG team, that we are maneuvering through the COVID experience, but I really want to hear about your experiences as well. So as we start this, let's set up a few virtual norms for ourselves. I wasn't brave enough, let me be honest with you, to try to hook up a padlock to Teams, but I would like to use the chat box as an opportunity for us to discuss what's going on and to share our thoughts. So to me, this presentation will only be successful as I'm to share it with you and to share this experience with you and have your comments. So a couple of things, if you have a comment to make, please feel free to unmute your mic and just say your name, maybe where you're from, and to make your comment. If you're afraid of interrupting, then please go ahead and put your comment in the chat box. And Len, can you help me monitor that chat box if I miss a comment?
I will do so.
Perfect. I'm trying to maneuver through my my notes at the same time as Teams, at the same time as my presentation, but I don't want to miss a comment because I do want to make this as interactive as I can. So let's practice with our first virtual conversation now. And look at how things are going right now. I want to talk about how you're doing with this COVID fight. And I think that Jen did a great job of introducing that to us, and we're all in different places across the nation. As I imagine, we're in different places across our states, right? So let's talk about how many of you are working from home. I know in Teams, I don't see a thumbs up, but if you're working from home, can you go ahead and put a I'm from home in the chat box there? Let me see what our audience is doing. So are you working from home? Yeah, we have Sue from home, Rachel from home, Holly from home. All right. Yep, there we go. We have Minnesota from home. Do we have anybody at all in the office? Is there anybody who's working in an office right now? So if we follow If we follow the chat box, it looks like most of us are from home, which means that we have a real intimate understanding of what our LEAs and what our students are going through. Great participation. Thank you for the chat box, because here's my next question. How many of you have your own kids or kids that you're caring for in your home right now? So school-age children in your house. So, yep. No children but dogs. Dogs do count sometimes, especially when you're on a conference call and they need to come interrupt you. Yes. And I think that's perfect. I think that we're looking at, this is our lives, right? If you look in the chat box, yes, we have kids. Yes, I have dogs. Yes, we have people here. And so we have interruptions. Here's my very favorite interruptions, very personal. I'm going to share it with you. It's super hard just to talk to my screen, by the way, because I can't see y'all's reaction. We just bought a house maybe 2 years ago. So since we bought the house, we were slated to have the roof done. So guess which day they've decided to come do my roof? Today. And they showed up about 10 minutes ago. So please know that I'm trying to kick the roofers off. I have my husband out there fighting them off. But if you hear construction, I have to admit that would be my current circumstances. They might be louder than a dog, I'm afraid. But let's move on to, yeah, don't forget your husband. Let's move on to what we're here to talk about today. And I do want to talk about how we look at what we're going with our homes, with working from homes, with our kids, to our school-aged kids, to what we're seeing at schools. So how many of you have seen administrative friends or teachers work hard for the needs of our students? Yes, thank you. Thank you, Allison. Absolutely, Amanda. Incredibly hard. Absolutely. Fantastic. This could be my favorite way to chat. I love that you guys are with me. I have watched my poor friends just stay up late at night, get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, doing exactly what Annette just said, going above and beyond to try to reach our students. And so as a SPDIG team, we're trying to figure out how to support them. And I imagine that that's how you're feeling too, right? What can you do for your LEAs? What can you do for your friends that supports them? And that's kind of what I'm hoping that these resources that we're going to go over today will do for you. So let's go ahead and we'll go to the next slide. Today's presentation, I'm going to share with you kind of how Utah's tackled this. They've developed what they call 3 phases to recovery. So I'm going to share with you that, and then I'm going to dive into 5 areas of focus. We're going to focus on accessibility considerations, pacing and scheduling, virtual environment, planning and delivering equitable instruction, and family supports. So pretty interesting things. I was impressed with our State Board of Education. They came up with 3 phases, which being an MTSS person, I'm like, great, it's a tiered approach. And the very first in March, when we did the soft closure, we called that phase 1. And then the first thing that we want to do is to be able to address the essential needs for students, for staff. Let's look a little bit about what those phases look like. So when you look at the phases, I will go back. You have phase 1, which is addressing the essential, phase 2, which would start to bridge those learning gaps, and phase 3, which is returning and recovering back to where we're at. I want you to think for a minute where you're at in your state. If you'll play along with me, let's look at phase 1. Are you still doing phase 1 where you're maybe in lockdown? Terry, aren't you still at your house? Like, you're not able to leave yet, right?
Yeah, we're still under state order.
Yeah, so you're to be still in phase 1. So you're still providing opportunities for as many students as you can, but you're staying in your home. You're still locked in. And I imagine many states are still in phase 1. Would you type in what phase you might be at? Let's look at phase 1, providing all your focuses on the 5 priorities, right? Learning, maybe helping our graduating seniors, meal service, support staff with emotional needs. Yeah, I see a lot of phase 1 still coming through. Thank you. That was a great idea to put your state in there, because then we kind of can see across the nation what we're looking at. Teleworking from home. Oh, somebody is going to the office. Teresa Farmer, where are you from? Yeah. So lots of different areas that they're hitting in. Yeah, and they may not be called phase 1, but that's kind of what you're doing. In May, Utah opened to what we call phase 2, where now we're able to go out to the office maybe with a mask on, but very limited amount of people. And so we're beginning phase 2, just like you are, Peg. So now we're trying to determine how we're going to use our funds. That was a great question this morning. Assessing how we're going to use formative assessments to do our learning gaps. Can we provide that small group tutoring in that last month of school? And then looking at what we've done with our digital work and how we want to do it. Yeah, Montana's slowly opening back up, right? Annette, are you in Montana? I heard that they were even open to school. Is that true? Did you know if this was school opening up in Montana?
Yes, as a matter of fact, and the superintendent happens to be a lifelong friend of mine. She's doing a soft opening, sorry for my echo, today and tomorrow. And then they'll wrap up the school year. A little over 2/3 of the families just wanted their children to have normal school. Obviously, desks and everything 6 feet apart, all of the social distancing in place. But they are a K-12 district with 56 students. And so with just a little less than 1/3 of the families not wanting the children in the building, she was easily able to adapt their very, very large building and make it happen.
Wow, what an accomplishment. Thank you so much for opening your mic and letting us know. I just thought, oh, there's our first school, that I've heard of tackling it. And I imagine, Annette, it'll be interesting to learn from what she discovers, because I think, like Arizona, our schools are closed to the end of the year as well. But with the prediction of a second wave, what's that going to look like? Or if we go back in the fall, which would be phase 3, what's that going to look like? And looks like Montana might be giving us some lessons in that district. So brave friend, good for her. So these are all considerations that as we work with our LEAs that I wanted to talk about. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my SPDIG team. There's a couple of us on USBE staff, which is for the state board. And then I have 6 coaches. So there's 8 of us total. We coach about 35 LEAs along in Utah, and we reach about 400,000 students. That's about 60% of the students in Utah are involved in this SPDIG grant. So great opportunity for us to reach out and find needs. In the map here of Utah, you can see this is what we call the Wasatch Front. Here's where most of our LEAs that we work with as a SPDIG team are. And we have a couple in southern Utah. This little dot right here, we're going to talk about him in a few minutes. This is San Juan School District, and I'll share with you a little bit about San Juan. So I wanted to point him out. He's way down here in the middle. I actually live right about up here in the Wasatch Front along the city line. So when we look at what we need to do for our students, let's talk about accessibility. So where you're at, most of us are working from home. We kind of talked about today. How's your Wi-Fi? Is it spotty? When your kids are streaming and you're trying to Zoom, or now we're trying to Teams, do you find that your Wi-Fi is dropping? Do your kids get frustrated when they're trying to do virtual learning and they're not able to access their internet? Looks like we have some mixed messages. Some of them are okay, some of it's stable most of the time. Oh, like this, Terry's able to have a separate network. And so these are all challenges when we think about accessibility, just one of the big ways that we want to think about how we're helping our different areas. Yeah, enough equipment. So if you've got 5 kids and you have 1 laptop, we're taking turns paying for extra bandwidth. There's another financial concern. So all of these things that we're experiencing, we would project that our LEAs and our schools and bound down to our kids are experiencing this as well. Let's read this quote together, and if you'll go ahead and read it out loud with me or read it in your head. This is from Pedro. Oh, I'm just gonna say from Pedro. That's at the core of equity, understanding who your kids are and how to meet their needs. You are still focused on outcomes, but the path to get there may not be the same for each one. So I don't know how many of you have seen this quote before, but I love the way that it says we're focused on outcomes. We're here for students. No matter what part in education we play, what our role is, our bottom line is what is best for students and what can we do for students and how can we help our student outcomes and our students be successful. And so as we look at that, let's start the tell of two LEAs. Take a minute to look at this slide, and then in the chat box, tell me what you notice. We're looking at San Juan School District, which was in southern Utah, along that little dot that I showed you earlier, and then Davis School District was right in the middle of the Wasatch Front. What do you notice? Yeah, the terrains do look differently. Can you read some of the stats below? Big difference economically, absolutely. Homeless population. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. The percentage of students with disabilities is about the same. Huge difference in the economic size. Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about San Juan. San Juan is very rural. It's about 54% Native American. From the district office, where I was talking to the special ed superintendent yesterday, it takes him 3.5 hours to get out to a school. That's one way. Yesterday, they lost a student to COVID-19. So they're definitely impacted about what's going on. You can see that they have 2,000 students and very spread out, 100% economically disadvantaged. Let's look at Davis School District, great school district as well, has 91 schools versus the 12, 72,000 students. Their schools are about 45 minutes. You can probably, area for their 91 schools, so very closely put together. About 20% economically disadvantaged, but as well as they're in their 4th year of rolling out a one-to-one computer initiative. So how do you imagine that their experiences have been if we've gone into virtual learning has been completely different? If you're thinking to yourself, they're completely different, you're right. Let me tell you some bright spots though. San Juan District, where I told you it takes 3.5 hours to get from the district office to the high school, their bus drivers have been driving around and delivering breakfast, lunches, and homework packets every day. Fantastic example of meeting the schools and their students' needs. Their superintendent knows all 3,000 students by name and their specific needs that he can help them with. So Davis School District is also meeting their school lunch and providing meals at select locations. But because of their computer initiatives, they're able to deliver their content virtually. So it's just a way of thinking and accessibility, how they're able to meet their students' needs, but a little bit differently. When we look at accessibility, we recommend that the LEAs can have several considerations. They look at their hardware, their software, their Wi-Fi, their bandwidth, some of those questions that we were talking about a little earlier, as well as let's look at our students. Do our students have cognitive needs? Do they have physical and sensory needs? What about our related services? Are we able to provide additional support through assistive technology? Another area that we want to look at when we're looking at providing equity is maybe our pacing and scheduling. And again, let's look at it from 2 lenses. So as a SPDIG, as a coach, as one of our coaches has created, his name is Glenn Dyke, and he's developed this to meet his LEAs. He has a calendar, and as you can see, hopefully through the PowerPoint, every day at 10 a.m. he would start a session between 90 and 120 minutes. It would go on various topics, data collection, instructions for students, and his LEAs were able to just join them when they were able to. And I think that the schedule of knowing when to do it and what is kind of an example of what we're asking our LEAs to do, correct? Like we're telling our LEAs, consider your pacing. What are your skills that you're teaching? What are the group needs? And what is most critical? So for those of you with school-age children at home, what has your experience been with the pacing of your students' education? Are they having like 40 minutes of homework, 4 hours of homework? What are you seeing? High school student with 7 or plus hours. Traditional school day, very difficult. 4 to 6 hours for 5th graders. A huge increase in the demand for kids. Rachel, I assume that increase is because several people are trying to keep theirs like an hour for every subject. 2 hours for 2nd graders. 2 hours, but not organized, so it takes longer. That's a great, some great input. Vastly different upon the demographics, absolutely. So again, something to talk about with LEAs is are we meeting what's most critical for our students? Do they really need 7 hours of homework? Are we hitting, how can we reduce the cognitive overload, but still make sure that we're providing adequate education? Yeah, 8 hours. So let's look at the proactive virtual environment and kind of make sure that you're set up for how you want that to be. So we looked at supporting our LEAs virtually, and so again, one of my coaches, Heidi, she shared how she provides professional learning across the state. She has about 8 LEAs that she's working with closely. And she's been doing the Zoom calls, which I assume most of you have been doing. She's participated in their virtual MTSS meetings, but her key one, which is actually number 3 on the slide, was meeting the LEAs where they're at. What do our LEAs need to that we can support them? And that takes having that relationship with them. And then creating an action plan for summer and fall professional development, as well as setting our goals for next year. So these next 2 slides are probably my favorite. I'm very excited to share with you. Shout out to Terry Marks, who helped develop these from AIR. But it talks about establishing expectations in our virtual environment. So at the beginning of this, we talked about how I'm using the chat box for conversations, which you guys have been fantastic about. And we expect and we want our teachers or our LEAs to do the same, right? To establish expectations, determine what settings they're going to use, and what behaviors are expected. If you have not seen this great teaching matrix from PBIS, it's a fantastic resource on helping teachers define safe, respectful responsibility as a virtual thing, maybe Zoom expectations, video conferencing expectations. Just another great activity that you could consider doing with your LEAs to set up a virtual environment. Planning and delivering effective and equitable instruction, which is, again, one of our key points to make sure we maintain. You want to look at SDI, specifically design instruction, how we're going to address related services, consider our English language learners, are we providing examples of UDL, and are we keeping engagement high? One of our current struggles, I know, as we wind up the school year, has been related services. What are some of the struggles that you have seen? Have you seen that there's one service that's more difficult than another in your area to provide? Yeah, physical therapy, absolutely, especially where we're trying to keep it away. I was just reading some of the comments. I was trying to figure out if they're saying that there's too much work. And I guess when somebody was saying that, Tara was saying that is a lot of work for our different students. All right, so we look at equitable instruction. I'm going to share a video with you. I will share what I have learned about Teams. When you're sharing a video in Teams, Len, which Len told me is kind of cautious, you have to turn on the sound. So right now I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, turn on the sound for the YouTube video, and then reshare it. So if you'll just give me 1 second, we'll get this back on, share the screen, turn on sound, and we're going to watch a video from Shelly Moore. So here Shelly's going to talk to us a little bit about.
Hi, my name is Shelly Moore, and I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. As Canadians, we have a reputation for finding and embracing the strength in our diversity. This value, however, hasn't been reflected in our classrooms, which still segregate students by ability, especially students with developmental disabilities. There's a gap in our understanding about what we know inclusive education to be, philosophically, versus what we understand and the importance of understanding inclusion in our practice. This is the question I'm trying to answer in my research, is how can we find the value in the day-to-day practice in our classrooms in terms of inclusive education? So how am I going to explain this to you? Now I can sit here and try and describe this, or we can have a little bit more fun. Why don't we go bowling? So let's talk about bowling. You have 10 pins, you have 2 balls, and you have a lane. The goal is to knock down as many pins as you can. But if you don't get them all, it's okay because you have another chance. But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle and I don't knock them all down, what often ends up happening to me is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball was the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins that are left standing, we often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2 pins that are staring, looking at you, are kids who need the most support and are kids who need the most challenge. So we end up choosing one, and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling, and let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They throw the ball down the lane at a curve. And I was actually really curious about this, so I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, you have to change your aim. In order to knock down the most pins with one shot, he aims for the pins that are the hardest to hit. Now let's just let this sink in for a second. We are taught to teach the head pins. We are not taught to teach to the kids who are the furthest and the hardest to get to. The kids with autism, the kids with Down syndrome. The part that's critical here, and it really aligns with Universal Design for Learning, is that so often the supports that we design for those kids on the outside of the lane are actually supports that all of the kids need. This is the part we need to understand if inclusive education is going to move forward in Canada. How can we find this value of diversity in our classrooms between the students? This is not just important for the outside pins, but it's critical for every single one of us. And just think, all we need to do is change our aim. Look how bowling changed education.
So while I switch screens back to my presentation, I wanted to put in the chat box, what are your takeaways from this video? What did it make you think when you're watching her talk about bowling? Yeah, I also love that perspective. What I liked about that video, and again, Terry Marks found that for me, is that it's quick and short, right? So it's about a 3-minute video. Can you see how maybe sharing that with your LEAs would be helpful? Can you think of an LEA in your head where you're like, yeah, I think they would talk about that in a faculty meeting for about 3 minutes. You know, they can take a few minutes. It does align with the myth of average, absolutely. All right, well, we're just about done, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up. But again, great little video from Shelley Moore. It will be in the slides, which are uploaded on the website that you can use. So as we continue to our next area, we're going to talk, let's go presentation mode. And we're going to talk a little bit about family supports. We need to remember that our key partners in education are the families. And I think sometimes, depending on who you work with, again, it kind of comes back down to the students and to the families. And we want to make sure that we're providing family support. So as we look at guidance for providing family support during remote learning, during a COVID crisis, during a soft closure, during a soft opening, like is in Montana, let's make sure we're focusing on learning with the essentials. We're scaling our learning time to be appropriate, and we provide the parents and families with those supports that they need. And just about out of time, so I might skip through my next slide. This was one of my coaches. Again, her name is Leanne Hawkins, and she was talking about how teachers are reaching out to families, how we haven't forgot about them. Perhaps you have a graduating senior. Is there people in the audience who maybe have had a graduating senior, who have friends with graduating seniors, that you see that we still care about them, that teachers have been reaching out to? And I think they've done a fantastic job. This will be the presentation as well. It talks about a school that's reached out to all of their students and how much they've missed them. It's another resource, again, little MTSS family involvement pyramid. But I love how it reminds the schools to parent activities and the parent to school activities, and kind of looks at what we're able to do during this time and what we need to provide for our parents. Last, as I finish up my presentation, I wanted to share with you, we have a distance learning Canvas module. It was developed in collaboration with American Institutes for Research. Again, a huge shout out to Terry Marks and her team for all their hard work to provide this resource. You can click here for the link when it's posted. You can go to our USBE website, and it follows these 5 main areas and provides resources for them. So a big thank you for your time. Thank you so much for your participation in the chat box. I really appreciate your comments, and thank you for this opportunity to be able to be with you. The next slides are all resources for you. Jennifer, we can't hear you.
Thank you. You can see me because I accidentally pressed on my camera. I'm glad I was camera ready. So thank you, Sydney. That was a fantastic presentation. Got everyone thinking, and you can see that from the chat commentary. So I appreciate all those ideas and resources and connections. Next up, we have Georgia, and Karen Sudeth and Andrea Catalano are going to share with you how Georgia is what's the word I'm looking for? Approaching their professional development during this time. So welcome, Andrea and Karen.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Yes, thank you. Really enjoyed Sydney's presentation, a tough act to follow, but we're delighted to be here today to share with you about Georgia's tiered system of supports for students, aka MTSS in Georgia. And we want to talk a little bit about transferring to a virtual environment. The big question, what do you do when the old reality becomes a new reality that exists as a virtual reality with little to no advance notice? And that's really the boat we all found ourselves in when the pandemic first began in our states. So one thing that I often think about is Robert Burns' poem where he says, "The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry." Well, sometimes they require us to have the ability to pivot. When we were first told our work was changing and to the degree that it was changing, we very quickly had to make some changes ourselves. And one of those changes was in our thinking. We had training set up within the next week with contracts for venues and consultants with airline reservations. Certainly, I would believe that most of you had something similar happen. It made us step back and ask, if not this, then what? We had to give our immediate attention to communications and getting the word out and sharing it in a way that people could understand. We had to reach out and cancel our venues that we had contracts with, and we had to notify our consultants not to get on the plane, not to head to Georgia, and we hope you can use that ticket later. We also had to notify the participants who had signed up for these 2 big regional trainings that we had going on. Then we wanted to communicate with our team members, all of our coaches and our SPDIC personnel, because they were the ones that were going to be getting all the questions from the field. And I guess one of the biggest things is we had to communicate with our business and our contracts offices. We needed to find out, are we going to be held responsible for paying these contracts and these venues, or is this considered some type of unforeseen act that we could get a pass on? So everybody needed to know, and that was the big piece. So I want to ask you, and if you will reply in the chat box, what is one piece that you already had in place that helped you transfer your work to a virtual environment? Just take a moment and think about that and respond in the chat box, which Sydney so eloquently trained us to do today. Sydney says communication is key. Let me say this. Some of the things that you might be thinking about are, did you already have a platform that you could use? Did you already have someone on your staff who was trained that could get it in motion quickly? All right, I'm seeing strong virtual platform, shared virtual workspaces. We already had courses in Canvas, great. 12 prior years experience in other positions working from home, building capacity. So there's a lot of good things that people have been doing, and that really was something that you could pivot very quickly with and capitalize on as you changed the way your daily operations took place. So go forward one slide. All right, one more. I'm not driving. I cannot drive a boat. I cannot drive a PowerPoint, but I do drive a car into downtown Atlanta. Now that ought to be frightening. All right. When we talk about shifting our work, we were in the middle of working on our annual performance report, and I'm sure some of you were doing the same thing when this suddenly happened. And we see that report is not just a compliance piece, but as a collaborative opportunity for us. And so we had to find ways to have virtual work sessions and also to be able to share out assignments for editing and reviewing, because you know, as you work through the report, you can be too close to it. You have to have feedback from others. So we had to figure a way to do that and make it meaningful. We were also in the middle of doing our cohort 3 applications, and we had to shift all of that to online work and virtual work, where we were evaluating applications with rubrics, with groups. Our state implementation team meetings are scheduled monthly. We send that calendar out for the whole year. Well, it's important to maintain that schedule. You don't want everything to be disrupted if you can secure some things and maintain them the way that they've been being. People need to be able to rely on things. So we maintain that schedule. We use that as an opportunity to reflect on our challenges, our successes, to talk about barriers. And believe it or not, we actually had more attendance at this very first meeting that we had after we all were sent home. So that was a success for us in and of itself. Let me alarm you, the Poodle Patrol is about to go off because there's 3 young men walking to my door. Let's shift it to the next slide. Thank you.
Perfect timing, Karen. This is Andrea. I'll take over from here.
All right, I'll mute. Thank you.
Sure thing. the joys of and the realities of working from home. So Karen just shared with y'all some of the things that we had to change immediately in the terms of our day-to-day operations. And as you know, just like y'all, most of our grant is really about professional learning. And so we had to make some immediate and major shifts to all aspects of our professional learning. So I just wanted to define a couple of terms first, because they may not be the same ones that you use. But for our SPDIG, we talk a lot about internal professional learning, and that's any training, coaching, support, et cetera, for our staff. So our Georgia Department of Education staff, and specifically our SPDIG personnel. When we talk about external professional learning, we're talking about that training, coaching, support, TA for typically our districts and schools, anyone outside of the Department of Education. And there are virtual components to both. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the shifts we had to make to all of those different areas. And Len, when you saw the screen going wild earlier, it was because I could not find a way to view the chat box and advance the slides. So if, as we have some participation in the chat box, if you or Karen wouldn't mind sharing what people type in, I would really appreciate it. So let's talk about internal professional learning first. And again, this is the training, support, development for our staff at the Department of Education. So really, it all started with the people. When we had to make this major shift, when our lives got turned a little bit upside down, we wanted to make sure we were focusing on our SPDIG personnel and putting people first and making sure that they were okay and comfortable. So that really entailed us creating professional learning and technical assistance for our own team. Things like making sure we're comfortable using the online platforms that we had access to, making sure that we're comfortable providing training in a virtual format, whereas we may have been doing it face-to-face before. We wanted to provide easy access to our team members and make sure they were able to utilize all of our resources. So we really spent some time putting all of our access information, whether that be passwords or login pages, all in one place. We made sure to remind folks of what we already had on hand that was created to support them. And again, creating a repository for that. Coordinating calendars was a real big one. This is self-explanatory, but it's so important. Making sure that as we started to move to a virtual environment, we weren't booking on top of one another, especially because for us, for some of our online professional development platforms or delivery platforms that we have, we don't all have our own access. And so making sure that we're not booking a meeting with one district while someone else is booking a meeting with another district and not having the technology to do that was really important. We wanted to make sure that we were maintaining quality, right? So just because we're shifting from face-to-face to virtual for the time being, we still have a certain level of service and quality that we expect of ourselves, and we wanted to make sure that our SPDIG personnel felt comfortable still delivering at that same level of quality. And building relationships virtually. Karen and I have talked a lot about how do we continue to build relationships with our own staff who we no longer see in person? So typically our team, just like the previous state was just talking about, they're very large. Georgia's very geographically large too. So our team would get together in person about one time a month, and we're no longer doing that. So how do we build and maintain our own relationships virtually? And how are we coaching our SPDIG personnel to make sure they're comfortable building relationships with their districts and schools virtually as well? And then finally, ensuring that our personnel remain motivated. On our team, even in our virtual meetings that we've now moved to, we've really set an expectation that there are no passive participants. Everyone has a voice, and the expectation is that they use it because we really are stronger as a team. You know, it's that whole idea of collective efficacy, that together we can do things that we absolutely could not do as individuals. And so ensuring that our team knows that has really helped with motivation. So with that internal professional learning for our team and Department of Education staff, we had to adapt to a virtual format pretty quickly. As Karen mentioned, we had some trainings planned just days away when we were told that we couldn't deliver them. So we had to revise our training plan and content, and most of that surrounded the work with our national consultant. We had planned for her to do some training externally with some of our districts and schools as well as our coaches. And we had to really shift that plan and think, you know, how can we make the most of this new virtual format? So we were able to actually shift and have our national consultant provide us some internal training on topics that we had been hoping to get more information for on ourselves over the course of the year. So we were able to meet with her a couple of times, and we restructured that format. So whereas we normally might just meet face-to-face for a full day, instead we met for half a day of content, and then we did a half-day follow-up. And that half-day follow-up was scheduled 2 days afterwards, so that we had time to really process the new information, come up with any questions we had, and then come back to the table. So really rethinking that format. Agendas, pre-work, readings, those are things that we typically send out in advance to our team anyway, but it's become really critical in this new environment that we do that we have agendas, because as was shared earlier, folks are home with kids, husbands, wives, dogs. And so knowing when we're going to take breaks, when we're going to take lunch really matters, so that we can fit in day-to-day life in addition to the work that we're doing. One of the more successful changes in the restructured format was having an extended lunch period, but that there were activities and readings built into that lunch. So we had assignments to do, but also there was an extended lunch that folks could get some of those things done at home, like help their kids with school, that we knew they needed to do. And then having clear expectations and timelines has really helped internally. Again, clear expectations and timelines are something that are always beneficial, but when we're in this new virtual format where we're not looking each other in the eye and seeing each other face to face, it's just been critical that we all know this is what I'm to get done and this is when it's due. So when we talk about virtual professional learning, we were really excited to see some of the fruits of our labor pay off, because we already had a very strong virtual foundation. We had a robust web page that I know will be posted after this, and we can type it in the chat box as well. But that has everything from digital units of study. So if a district wanted to still continue with professional learning that we could no longer deliver face-to-face, but they wanted to, all of the PowerPoints, the handouts, the materials they would need were already on our web page. We had developed online courses around some of the essential components of MTSS. So we have an online course that does an overview of the essential components. We have an online course for screening. We have an online course for progress monitoring. And those are housed in our statewide longitudinal data system. Because they were already created, we've seen a huge increase in the number of folks taking those courses. Some of those courses, we had a couple hundred people enrolled, but prior to all of this, and now we have well over 1,000 who've taken the course. So we're because that was already in place, we were able to leverage it and continue the learning. We have web-based training platforms as well, just like all of you do. And what was really critical was our team knew how to use a lot of them. So we use Microsoft Teams, Skype, GoToWebinar, things like that. And we already knew how to use them. So we were able to still continue with effective online or distance learning. And then in Georgia, we have the student support team, which really supports students who might need services at Tier 3. And once a student has a student support team, there are very specific steps that are taken, people that need to be at meetings, and a lot of documentation that goes with that. And we had already developed, as part of our SPDIG, an online application or an online platform that districts in Georgia could use for free to document that process and that team. And because that was already in place, the work was able to continue seamlessly. So in terms of our virtual professional learning, we really had a solid foundation in place, and we were excited to see that that was really able to support us through some difficult times. So external professional learning, again, this is the professional learning that we provide to districts and schools around the state of Georgia. We've always used the training cycle, as we know many of you do too, where we plan, deliver, and then follow up, and that hasn't changed. But as Karen mentioned, we had some external professional learning planned the week after we were told we couldn't hold it face-to-face, and so we had to really pivot on the spot. So when it came to planning, these external professional learning opportunities that were now going to be in digital or virtual format, we involved a collaborative process, and that can't be said enough. It wasn't just myself or just Karen transitioning this training. We had a team of 4 people. They were regional coaches that worked with districts all over the state, because just like you, our districts have different needs and are very different from one another. So we had wide representation on the team that looked at transitioning this training. We provided the agenda, the questions to ponder, and all of the resources prior to the training. Again, that's something we've always done, but it's become even more critical in this current time to make sure that everyone has what they need up front. We also were really intentional about, what's an appropriate length for an online training. And so we knew that the content was important. We knew that it was information that folks wanted. At the same time, we knew it was unlikely that folks were going to sit there all day long at their computer and stay engaged. So we intentionally reduced the length of the training and focused on making sure we got the most important information and the most important opportunities for practice to our audience in a condensed time frame. And then we had really explicit discussion and planning around how are we going to engage participants, because we know that's a challenge. Jennifer mentioned earlier, it can be exhausting participating in these virtual trainings or virtual webinars, whatever format you're using. It can really be tiring to pay attention while at the same time you're trying to school your kids or make sure the dog's not eating something in the yard, all of those things. So we talked about how can we make sure that folks participate in this format. So when we delivered the professional learning, one of the key things we did was we offered multiple sessions. So we offered, this particular training was on the multi-level prevention system, tiers 2 and 3 specifically. And so we offered that training on a Tuesday, and we offered the same exact training again on a Thursday, so that folks had an opportunity to catch it live if they couldn't make one or the other. We specifically built in, like I talked about, opportunities for participant engagement, and we use multiple methods. So just like we're doing today, the chat box was an option. Folks could unmute if they wanted to. We actually had 2 people running the training, so one who was presenting and one who was facilitating, and Karen will talk about that in a little bit. But what that allowed us to do is some of our participants were actually sending us documents and activities via email in real time looking for feedback. So we just were able to make sure that folks were engaged. So knowing that, I'd love to pause for a minute, and if you would type in the chat box, what are some ways that you've successfully engaged participants in a virtual environment? Because we know for us that is and continues to be one of the biggest challenges. So have you utilized the chat box? Have you utilized polls? What does that look like for you? So what have been some of your successes in engaging participants in a virtual environment? And Karen, if you could call some of those out, I still can't see the chat box.
I see breakout sessions, poll, chat box, sharing examples, breakout rooms, and Padlet is fun.
Awesome.
Short sessions over multiple days, no long all-day sessions.
Yes.
Whiteboards, polls, breakouts, Padlets. For smaller groups, just having the cameras on is helpful.
Yes.
That does build relationships. Yes to the above. We have an awesome 3-hour virtual state leadership team meeting by utilizing Zoom, Google Docs, leveraging. Interview with an educator with Q&A from audience, poll chats. There's a lot of good things here, Andrea.
I know, I'm taking some notes as you're saying it. This is great.
Yeah. It's good. Chat box, planning ahead, use of breakout rooms.
Very cool. Thank you. And we're very grateful, not only to share today, but to learn from you. Some of those things I haven't used. And so I'm excited to hear that you're having success with them, because we can hopefully have success with those same things in the future. So continuing with our external professional learning and the training, having to adapt it to an online format, the follow-up became really important. So we recorded and archived the session, and that really benefited us in a couple of different ways. Number one, it allowed for follow-up support. So folks who were on the webinar, were able to keep accessing it if they wanted to watch something again or revisit the content. But it also allowed us to provide a universal support for the entire state of Georgia for schools and districts, whether or not they were participating as part of the cohort in our SPDIG. So the recording and all of the resources are posted on our website, and anyone, whether they're in Georgia or not, can access that. So that really helped with the follow-up. Again, we provided web-based resources. I think I talked a little bit about that, but we sent all of our resources in advance, like I mentioned. We also loaded them into the online platform that we were using, and then we sent them all again afterwards. And people seem to really appreciate that. And then we did provide virtual coaching for the districts and schools that are specifically in our cohorts under our SPDIG. So after the training itself, each district had an opportunity to have kind of one-on-one coaching with their assigned regional coach in a virtual format to make sure that any of their questions or next steps, that they had someone to process that with, just like they would have in real time. So one of the things that was really exciting for us was we actually saw an increase in attendance in our online training. We were really concerned that moving from face-to-face to online, we would see a decrease in attendance. But actually we saw about a 21% increase. And the number isn't really what's important. It's more that we had an increase at all, because like I mentioned, we expected that number to go down. One of the really neat things that, that I thought was exciting at least was, as I mentioned, we offered this training 2 times in 1 week. So we offered it on a Tuesday and then again on a Thursday. And what happened was word got out that the training, obviously some folks saw some benefit in it, because between Tuesday and Thursday, we had about 50 additional people register for the training, which is unusual for us. So we had 200 participants total and about 50 registered after that first one. So that was really exciting for us. Some of the feedback that we received, I just wanted to share with you because, as I mentioned, we had concerns about moving to the online format and how would it be received. And so one participant you can see on the left just said that they were very grateful that we were still providing professional learning as we practice the social distancing, because we still need the opportunity to continue and grow in our learning. And we completely agree. We don't want our own learning and development, and certainly not the services we can provide to kids, to stop because of these unfortunate circumstances. Another neat kind of unintended consequence was, as this participant on the right said, they were able to send more staff to the training because they could attend from home. There weren't any travel costs. They didn't have to get substitutes. So whereas normally this district could only send maybe 2 or 3 people to the face-to-face training, they were able to have entire teams attend the live training. So that was really neat. This was one participant on the left who told us that this was on Thursday. They said, I actually participated in this training on Tuesday. So we had some repeat participants, which is really neat too. Again, they can always watch the recording, but some folks chose to actually attend live more than once. And then someone said that they honestly liked the online training better, which I wasn't expecting. But they brought up a good point, which is, sometimes when we're face-to-face, there can be some hesitancy to ask questions, especially if it involves us being vulnerable or talking in front of our peers about something that maybe we're struggling with. And so in this format, folks were really more comfortable asking questions because they could send them to us privately. They didn't have to put them in the main chat box where everyone could see them. And so we actually had greater participation from some people than we would have were we face-to-face. So I'm going to turn things back over to Karen, who's going to talk about just some of the takeaways and lessons learned as we made this transition very quickly.
Thank you, Andrea. And again, my apologies for the Poodle Patrol. I can't get them to understand that they need to be quiet when I'm presenting. But when we talk about takeaways from this, we encourage you to utilize a reliable online platform. And of course, a lot of you have heard some of the issues with Zoom, and there may be issues with other platforms too if they're not secure. So make sure it's reliable. You may even want to do a test run before you do something like that. And I know a lot of you have experience with this already, but that was one of our takeaways. Another is assign both a presenter for content and a facilitator for logistics. Sometimes if I try to do it by myself, I find myself staring at the chat box and getting off track. So it's always helpful to have a partner there. And then know who your audience is in advance. What is the interest that they have? What is it that they want to take away from this? So that is very critical in making sure that your presentation aligns with their needs and that you kind of help them through the frustration of everything being virtual right now. Again, practice beforehand. I already mentioned that. It is always helpful, especially if you're in a new platform and you've not used it before. try it with a friend and see how that works out. When you're presenting or designing something, make sure that you try to engage the audience, try to get them to respond or do polls, just like Sydney did, and we have asked you to respond in the chat box. Then monitor the engagement. Look and see how many people are attending. Is the attendance increasing, or is it falling off? Is there something that you might want to consider doing differently? A lot of what we described about how to structure this really goes back to what Sydney shared with us as well about how to structure instruction for the students at home. Just because they have 5 teachers doesn't mean they need 5 precise hours of instruction. So you need to look at what you are trying to message, what the intent is, and then figure out how that's best going to meet the needs of your audience and keep them engaged. And then you want to record and archive the training, because someone may decide they want to listen to it again, or they may go back and tell their team, hey, we listened to this the other day. I want you all to listen to it. So there are many opportunities for that. So I'm Karen Suddeth, my partner, who is wonderful, Andrea Catalano. So we're here to answer any questions you might have. If you want to open your mic or type in the text box, we'll be glad to respond. We thank you so much for your time and listening to us today. And I do apologize for the poodles.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much, Karen and Andrea. I'll tell you what, my dog's 75 pounds. When he barks, it's more than a little distracting. So our next presenter is Mari Strand Carey, and she is from the University of Oregon. And with the Stepping Up grant from OSEP, Office of Special Education Programs, has developed a fantastic technology tool that is free to the public and could potentially be used for your elementary schools within an MTSS model. And so because it's possible for folks to use this, for teachers to use this with their students during this time, we thought it was especially important for her to present. So Mari, did you want to share your screen?
I do want to share. What are you seeing right now?
I don't see the screen yet. There, now I see you.
Okay. Let's see. We have to, how about now?
Give it a second. 1, 2, not so far.
Okay, oops, I'm going back. All right, we'll escape. Make sure I've told it what I want you to see. Let's try this one. Oops, now you're gone.
There you go.
Yep, there you have it.
And what view are you seeing? Are you seeing my planning slides, or are you seeing a full screen?
I don't yet see the slideshow, but I do see the full, I just see the PowerPoints. I don't see any notes or anything like that.
So a big, nice screen of.
Yeah, it looks good. Yeah.
All right. We don't need you all reading what I'm going to say.
No, it looks great.
Because I don't see anything now, so I'm kind of flying blind here. Okay, so my name is Mari Strand Carey, and I thank you all very much for having me come today. I am going to present about KinderTech, and this is a project that has been federally funded. I have a slide about that at the end, and really has been a long time coming with a lot of teacher input, so I'm excited to share it with you. What do you see now?
We're still seeing the slides on the side and so forth. So if you just play from start or play, there you go. That does it.
What's that? All right. Are you seeing the What is KinderTech slide now?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay. Perfect. We're on track now. Thanks for bearing with me. So first, I wanted to make sure you knew what we were talking about before we launched into this. And basically, instruction is our key. So KinderTech is a flexible and customizable system of iPad-based foundational math instruction to suit a wide variety of needs and learning context. And our goal really is to increase knowledge, not just to build fluency or entertain kids. We have a video posted in multiple places on the web that you can check out on your own time and check out our website and things like that. But I will also let you know that the University of Oregon and a local company, Concentric Sky, here in town that developed KinderTech have made this readily available during COVID to educators and families. And so we'll have a slide about that later to learn how to access that. KinderTech was initially conceptualized as an intervention or a preventative intervention, and it's really aimed at helping students struggling with kindergarten level math. So it maps really well onto the work all of you guys do. And at the same time, we know that our youngest learners aren't always identified as having math learning disabilities, or services aren't readily available. And also that iPads are really powerful tools and also very cool and much desired by kids. So we wanted to make sure that KinderTech could be used by and useful for all kindergarten students, and in fact, preschool students as well. Indeed, just as was brought up with the bowling analogy earlier, we really are aiming at the students who are struggling. And we knew that by doing that, by incorporating the research on helping struggling students and really drawing on the special education research, that we would actually produce something that could be useful for all students, most students, at least some of the time, or at least in some ways. So that was really exciting for us, and it's been nice to see that come into action. All right, so why do we need KinderTech at all? This is not going to be news to most of you, but students come to school with vastly different backgrounds in math. That early math skill that they have is very predictive of later math achievement. And unless we identify the students who are at risk early on and intervene early, serious problems are really going to stick with them and remain pretty intractable over time. So any achievement gaps you see early are going to stick around for a long time. We don't know as much about math as we do about reading. We haven't put as many things into play, and there hasn't been as much research. That's rapidly changing, but we're still not caught up with reading yet. On the positive side, there is significant interest in changing this and improving the math performance of the nation's students, closing the achievement gaps, and moving all students forward. So that's really good. Despite all that interest, which actually has been of interest for a long time, many young students are really not getting the math instruction they need to ensure a strong start in school. And student need often exceeds the school resources and the capacity, especially given the emphasis on reading and the many roles and services that educators are really expected to fit into their school day and for their students. So as we conceptualize and develop KinderTech, we strove to bring about evidence-based instructions to schools. Especially schools with scarce resources, so that we could really give all kids a chance to build that foundation in early math. And by recognizing the constraints the teachers face, we could design a system that would be feasible for teachers, and that would help students directly, and that would give teachers the flexibility to do data-based decision-making and one-on-one instruction and small group work. KinderTech is different than a lot of apps on the market and a lot of programs out there in that it really takes our Center on Teaching and Learning and University College of Education's vision and mission and instructional design expertise and bakes it into the program. It combines that with years of technical development and user testing, and then rigorous science every step of the way. And in the handout that you'll see posted tomorrow, I think, there is a data slide that I'm not going to talk about today, just for the interest of time, but we can always talk about that for the question period. So next, let's get into a little bit about how KinderTech works. As we get ready to launch into that, I want you to think for a moment about educational technology and principal and teacher willingness to implement that with young students. I'm wondering what you think is the biggest obstacle or pain point or likely argument against trying ed tech in the next year or so. And this is, your personal opinion. There's no right answer here. I put some ideas down on the screen. If you have other ideas, you can type them in the chat. I'm not going to be able to see any of them the way I have my monitors going. So hopefully that is happening. Do you guys are able to do that?
Tracy Watterson says lack of professional learning opportunities. Vicky Griffo says A and E. Sue Dacre says E. Donna says E.
E is winning. Interesting.
Karen says D. Peg says E. Carrie says A and D. Sydney says time in the school day.
Yes. Okay, so that gives me an idea of where you're going with all this. And I mean, all of these are obstacles and pain points. So we definitely had all these things and more in mind as we started developing KinderTech back in 2011. And we really wanted to make what goes on in high quality teacher-led instruction more scalable. And so we had to think about all these things because you can't just throw something in the classroom and expect it to work. So we really sought to minimize all these pain points on the screen as well as others that you guys have been coming up with. And I'm really excited to read all those details later. So let's see if I can do that. So what we did was we tried to blend, well, we did blend principles and best practices from special education and teacher-led intervention research. With engagement, motivation, and user interface practices used by gaming and software companies. We also built in all the opportunities and affordances that are part of one-to-one instruction and that are part of iPads so that we could really make the most of this learning opportunity. And a huge one, we really are thinking about classroom and home constraints every step of the way. The things like the infrastructure and the time and the training and what do you need to get it going? And what if it's not the teacher who's implementing it? It's some random parent volunteer. We tried to take all that in consideration as we designed it and as we provided resources for it. And all this was coming together to offer engaging, customized, differentiated instruction. So that differentiated instruction is mostly handled by the apps. I'm going to start talking through things there. There are a few screenshots from the app here as the student sees it. And the first thing to know is that our login approach, and you see in the upper left of the screen, is really one of the favorite things about the app for our teachers and our students because it's so easy and it just works. No complicated passcodes, nothing crazy. The teacher can look it up quickly if the student forgets it. We have printable password cards for the first couple days or after Christmas break or whatever. So it's easy to get started. And then the instruction itself happens through a total potential of 51 explicit instruction activities. Each one of those has critical math content, customized supports that are built into the activity and that also are catered to that particular student's needs at the time. A model lead test structure so that students see what we're trying to ask them to do first and then are really led through the experience hand in hand, and eventually all the scaffolding is faded away and they're tested on whatever that skill or concept is. And then visual math models to drive home concepts. You see a few on the screen here. Really, we wanted to have a few different models, the number line, the base 10 blocks, the 10 frame, things that could be used throughout the app itself, but would also tie into what they're seeing in class. And most importantly, really give a sound conceptual base. We didn't want to use things just randomly here and there. We wanted something they could keep coming back to. And all of that is an environment that is designed to be extremely adaptive. So moment by moment and over time, the content, the supports, the feedback students are getting, which is really academic feedback, the pacing, everything depends on what the student, that particular student, is doing in that moment and has done up to that point. We have the lessons always work the same way, but there are different modes that students can experience those lessons through. So in exploration mode, that top one, the students really get to choose, and it's an untimed experience, and they can spend as much time as they want in a given activity. They can go to the hardest activity, even though they aren't prepared for it. They can go to the scrapbook gaming area and just do puzzles the whole time. This is really something that teachers need to keep an eye on what students are doing if they're expecting them to learn the math. If it's a background activity, a center activity, an indoor recess activity, then maybe not such a big deal to keep an eye on what students are doing. The other way we can do this is through a timed experience, and we have the sequence directed and screening modes that have timed sessions. And for those, it works students through a carefully chosen lesson sequence. All 51 activities in the case of sequence mode, and that builds in time for rewards and games and things like that at the end. That's most relevant for today's audience, I think, because it really is designed to give students all those different math skills and build it up bit by bit by bit. There's also the directed mode, which allows that same sequence to exist, but now the teacher selects 1 or 2 types of skills that they want the students to work on, and just those activities become part of the sequence. And so that's really useful for students who have gaps in their knowledge, or if a teacher wants to complement a particular activity being done in the classroom. There are a lot of different ways you can use KinderTech, and I actually, again, have some hidden slides about that you'll see in the handout. But right now, I just wanted to show you some of the ways teachers have said they've used it. We said, you know, in this dissemination study we did as part of our OSEP grant, how did you use this? And some used it in conjunction with other individualized programs. Some used it as a math time activity to do if people finished early. Some used it as an intervention with struggling students in pullout, and then maybe added full class instruction as part of that. Small group rotation for math centers. Students worked on it individually, and then the teacher then had time and ability to pull students out for small groups. So there's a lot of different ways you can do this. One thing this also speaks to is that this is really well suited for MTSS frameworks because it puts the power in the teachers and the special educators' hands as to how they use that. You can use it at multiple points during the day. You can use it in different ways in different settings. And there's really clear communication built in that you'll see to allow educators to communicate with each other about how the student is doing, how the progress is going, and any other notes they have. Here's some more screenshots, and this shows how the app has many ways for the students to kind of self-monitor and the types of rewards and motivation they're seeing as they work. So they earn stickers for a combination of persistence and mastery. They earn photos as they actually do master activities. And then for students who need it, there are different checkpoints and visual cues for them to see kind of what they've already worked on, what they're going to be working on next if they need that to kind of reduce any anxiety about what's coming next in their school day. There are all sorts of indicators that the teacher can turn on or off, but are set to defaults to help students. And then the rewards you see across here on the left side of the screen, the report page that students see, and it really talks about what they've been working on, how much progress they've made through the whole content, whether they've been doing a good job of staying engaged, are they paying attention to what they're being asked to do, and things like that. You see their scrapbook. That's where all their stickers and photos get dumped during the session, and then they can play with them and move them around and turn pages and do all that during the reward time. And then we have a memory and a puzzle game available, and those change all the time. So students really enjoy getting to their reward time. For the educator or the parent, the app includes all sorts of reports as well as management and communication options. So you see on the left screenshot, that's the student level at a glance report. And on the right, that's the first student level at a glance. Oh, sorry, that's the first report card. And that's something that parents find really useful to share with teachers and even the students themselves at different parent-teacher conferences and things like that. The app does have a teacher notes feature, just like the online data dashboard, and this is where different educators can communicate with each other. Or now during COVID, or later if people are using this for an at-home activity, a parent and teacher could actually communicate via this approach. These screenshots give you a glimpse of different settings and options. Educators usually find the defaults pretty darn good for most kids they're using this with, but it seems that each teacher does have a handful of students for whom they do want to change things. You can change the time, you can change what kinds of prompts are on the screen, what kinds of cues are on the screen, obviously how they're using it and what skills they're working on and things like that. So that's something we really encourage teachers to think about changing, especially if their student does seem to be getting off track or unengaged. We developed all these things and really all the flexibility of the system during our OSEP Stepping Up Technology Grant. As for the teacher dashboard, that is a feature of the KinderTech Pro version because as part of that, data is synced across devices and is viewable through any online browser. And that makes it super easy for teachers to do all sorts of management and reporting at both the student level and group levels, and to see more detailed data, and then to do database decision making with colleagues. It also allows us to support families during COVID, which is an excellent thing. So we've been able to push that out during this time. Parents can view their child's data that they've either already amassed to date or that they are generating at home. We've made it possible for a student to use their school account at home now. So we have some teachers that are having their students continue learning at home, and we have other classes just coming on board now who the teacher is setting up the account and the students are starting KinderTech at home. It only works if they have an iPad, so that is a definite constraint because we haven't had the funding available to make it cross-platform. But a lot of places and families do have iPads, so at least let some of our kids gain access to that. There are tons of reports on the dashboard. These can be split by lesson, Common Core standard, domain, student level, class level. And a quick glance at that bottom left report, for example, can show a teacher, oh, maybe I should tackle this skill again in class. A lot of kids really are not doing so well on that. Or maybe I could pull a small group of students to work on this skill. So it gives them a chance to kind of just do a quick glance and see how they might want to change their own instruction. Clicking on anything in here drills down to more detail. A lot of teachers don't want that, but it's there if they do. You can also export and print all sorts of things here. And there's a lot of setting management available here at a very fine-tuned level. One of our teachers actually really appreciated that this was Common Core aligned and reported in this way. And they said the students enjoy it. And I know that their time is well spent because it aligns so well to the Common Core standards. So teachers that are thinking about this in their instruction and need to report out to their principal or the parents in these ways, this is a useful tool. This is one of the student-specific reports that's available on the dashboard. And you can, as a teacher and a parent, really drill down and hover on each of those little squares and see what that activity was and how they're doing. And the colors indicate, you know, whether they've mastered it, pre-tested out of it, or working on it, or have kind of skipped out of it. And there are different ways to think about using that data. The teacher notes appear here as well. Again, these are student-specific. They can be made in the app or online, and they get shown to any adult who has access to that student. And another report, this is a nice bird's eye view of just what the class has been working on, whether they've been in different modes, and in that first column, or second column, I guess, their engagement rate. You might see some students with very high engagement and some students with a very low engagement, and it's a good chance for teachers to go maybe check that out and find out what's going on there. For this audience, it's also important to know that school district administrators can have access to this and see things at the group levels or drilled all the way down. So that's also good to know as we have more people adopting this. As I mentioned, parents can now see data and kids can use those same accounts from home. So this is just a little glimpse. Now you see the same types of reports in the app, but the parent only has access to their child. They're not seeing the whole class. Same with the online site. And so I've talked a lot.
Mari, sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We're right at time.
Okay.
So I think we'll probably wait on the poll, but I think everyone got the information about how to access it. This is fantastic and so important, and I'm really hoping that we're going to get it out to more states and disseminate even further, although it's doing very well on its own already and has had such good response. Any final words that you want to share with everyone?
Well, first of all, apologies for going on time. I didn't have any timers available. Do reach out to us if you have any questions. Our website has a great contact us form. We can get you hooked up with the Pro app if you're in the education space, or if you just want to use it with your own kid at home, you can go to the App Store. And we really want to be responsive to the needs of educators. So please be in touch and let us know how it's going and what we can do to help everybody.
We can do that. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, everyone, for your ideas in the chat pod and links to great resources. We will capture that meeting chat, and Lynn has been adding these to the event calendars, just so you know if you need a link later on. Mari, thank you for being with us. Sydney, Karen, Andrea, these were fantastic presentations and really got me thinking, and I could tell all the other participants too from the comments. So have a great afternoon, and everyone take good care.